I've been teaching woodworking full-time for about a dozen years, and I've come to the realization that the vast majority of hobbyist woodworkers are not interested in hand planes. And I get it. As satisfying as it can be to use a plane, many are just intimidated by the skills that are required to get those wispy shavings that online videos make look so easy. The average shop has more sanders than hand planes in it, and that's okay. While I do enjoy planes myself, I admit that I use power sanders for most projects, just like you do. But there is one type of sander that I will do almost anything to avoid using. A sander so awful that I've banned its use in my shop. Seriously, if I catch anyone in here using this sander, I'll yank the cord and throw both them and the tool out the back door. Don't test me like Grandma did. But I'll bet you have one of these sanders in your shop, and you probably even use it. You don't realize just how awful it is because no one's ever shown you that there is a much better way. Until today. Because today, I am going to end the reign of the belt sander forever. This is a terrible tool. And it's not about any particular brand or model. They're all terrible in their own way. Belt sanders are noisy, ham-handed tools that fill the shop with choking clouds of dust, and if you aren't very careful with them, you'll screw up a project faster than you can say, "Who sanded this big hole through my board?" If you use a belt sander in your shop, I implore you to give me a chance to show you that there is a better way, a way that's quiet and peaceful, that won't make a dusty mess, that will take an hour to vacuum and all evening to pick out of your nose. A way that is far more precise when you need it to be and far faster when you do want to hog a lot of wood off. Plus, this tool doesn't require any extension cords or batteries. You don't have to buy expensive replacement belts or paper. In fact, this tool's total lifetime cost can be anywhere from $0 to 10 or 15, because once you know what to look for, you'll find them at yard sales and flea markets. You may even have one on a shelf somewhere in your shop right now. But before I show you the tool that will virtually eliminate your belt sander, you have to promise to hear me out, because most people don't use this particular tool in the unique way that I'm going to show you. And if you don't give me a chance to explain what makes it unique, you're just going to look like a sucker using your belt sander for the rest of your life, while those who stuck around for this whole video will be laughing at you like this. So give me 60 seconds to put these sanders away and get set up. Then I'm going to change your life forever. IsoTune's Bluetooth hearing protection is the real deal. I've been using them for years, and so has everyone else in my shop, because I find that people are much more likely to protect their hearing when the tools are on if they already have on their earbuds or earmuffs for listening to music, podcasts, or other media while the tools are off. And right now, IsoTunes is running 2 special deals that you need to know about. You can either get 20% off select models, which I'll list below this video, or you can buy a model for yourself and get a second set to give as a gift, or to keep because you can't decide between earbuds and earmuffs, or between wired and wireless, or maybe you want one for the shop and another for work, whatever. I don't need your life story. I just want your ears protected. The sale ends in just a few days, and the details are below this video in the description and also pinned to the top of the comments. Please read it carefully. You'll be glad you did. Here it is, the tool that replaced my belt sander. You probably figured it out already. It is a hand plane. But wait a minute, it is not what you think. This is not one of those frou-frou planes that you have to fuss over or that's frustrated you in the past. Remember, I said most woodworkers won't use those, and I'm not here to change your mind about it. This is a flea market plane that takes virtually no skill to use. It is not for smoothing. It's not going to replace your regular sanders, but it will replace your belt sander, because this one has a particular modification, which I'm about to show you how to do yourself, that will enable it to remove wood faster than a belt sander without the dust or the noise or the electricity. The secret is in the cambered iron. I've ground a radius on the cutting edge, which completely changes how it works. This is no longer a smoothing tool. It is a wood hogging workhorse. Let me give you a couple of examples of how cambered irons can really be game changers. This workbench was not flat. I've leveled benches with belt sanders before. It's tedious and messy and easy to screw up. But a cheap hand plane with a modified cambered iron makes quick work of the high spots in a fraction of the time. A friend picked up an old dresser secondhand, and the drawers were way too tight, like you had to hammer them out of the case. I fixed the problem in about a minute without covering my shop in dust. Have you ever had a warped board that won't lay flat, but it's either too wide to use on your 6-inch jointer or you don't have a jointer? A cambered iron can knock off the high corners in an instant, making it safe to run through the table saw or stable enough to feed through your thickness planer. And that's just scratching the surface. You can use this to shape boards without a bandsaw. You can quickly turn a 2x4 into a 2x3 without a table saw. You can fit a door in an old uneven house. Pretty much anything you would use a belt sander for, and a lot of things you probably never thought of. So here's what I suggest. The next time you see a cheap hand plane for sale, for a few bucks, grab it. It could be a number 3 or a number 4 or a number 5 like this one, or even a cheap Stanley knockoff like this one from Harbor Freight. You might even have one on a shelf somewhere in your shop. Get it out. Blow the dust off. Don't be afraid of it just because it's a hand plane. You're not going to be using this to make toilet paper like shavings. This is going to be a rough tool for rough work that even the frou-frou hand plane guys will envy. All you have to do is camber the iron. So here's how to do it. I've ripped a thin scrap of wood to the same width as my plane iron, and I draw a line down the center. Then I set a compass to about 8 inches, and I strike the curve near the end of the wood blank. I cut out the curve, trim the excess length, and label my pattern so I can use it again in the future. At the bench grinder, I start with the tool rest at 90 degrees to shape the curve before I grind the bevel. I'm working on one side at a time, beginning each pass in the center and then turning the iron toward one of the corners. After the bulk of the steel is gone, I refine the curve the best I can with even sweeping arcs from corner to corner. You don't need absolute perfection at this stage. Just try to get the curve reasonably even. Take light passes and dip it in water frequently, especially if you're using a regular grinding wheel rather than the CBN wheels, which I use. If you turn the steel blue, it's not going to hold an edge well. Notice the flat facet that I created that's thinner in the center and gets wider toward the corners. I'll use this to my advantage now as I grind the bevel. With my tool rest now set to about 25 degrees, I create the bevel in the same way, lightly touching the center of the iron to the wheel and then rotating toward a corner, working on one side, then the other. I stop frequently to check the shape of that blunt edge that I previously created. The goal is to turn that facet that was once wider at the corners into one of even width across the entire cutting edge. If one side is narrowing more quickly than the other, take a few extra light passes on the thicker side and so on. You'll obviously do the least amount of grinding at the center where the flat facet is at its narrowest. Now you have to decide what you're going to use your tool for. If all you ever plan to do is really rough work, then you might create a sharp edge right off your grinder and just call it good. But there's also value in getting your cutting edge sharper and more refined than your grinding wheel is probably capable of. If you do want a razor sharp edge, then I would stop before completely grinding away the entire blunt edge. Instead, leave a tiny hair's width of that facet that's even in width from corner to corner. This will prevent you from overheating the micro-thin cutting edge. Then take your iron to your bench stones or just some sandpaper on a flat surface and install it in an edge guide. These inexpensive single wheel guides work well for cambered irons because you can rock it as you move it across the stone. I'm only going to need 1,000 grit. Press down on the right corner of the iron at the beginning of the stroke, then shift the pressure across to the other corner as you pull the guide toward you. Take another stroke, this time beginning with pressure on the left corner and shifting to the right. Repeat the process, going back and forth until the last of that blunt edge is gone and you can feel a burr across the entire back of the bevel. Remove the burr with some light rubbing flat on the stone, and you're done. A heavily cambered iron like this is not meant to leave an ultra-fine surface, so there really is no need to go beyond 1,000 grit in this case. When it dulls, you'll return to the stone. You shouldn't have to return to the grinder unless you chip the iron or you significantly change the curve of the edge after many sharpenings. Try a hand plane with a cambered iron the next time you need to remove a lot of wood fast. You may never use your belt sander again.